Good evening, folks. Everything new under the sun. Just a little reminder of what Luke chapter 21 says about the last days. It says, some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left upon another. Every one of them will be thrown down. Now, there's a part of this that's a near future and far ahead future. And of course, the near future is the destruction of the second temple. And it certainly was torn down. It was burned down, actually. The gold melted, ran between the stones of the temple. And so literally, the soldiers and everybody scavenging for any little bit of gold they can find basically picked apart the rocks. Every single rock was picked apart to look for melted gold that may have fallen in between it. So when it says every one of them will be thrown down, that's exactly what happened. And so they said, Teacher, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place? He replied, Watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and the time is near. Don't follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Then he said to them, verse 10, Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. Now that verse 11 there, that sounds an awful lot like the four horsemen of the apocalypse writing, and I think we're just about there. But there is more, verse 12. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and put you in prison, and you will be brought before kings and governors, all on account of my name. And so you will bear testimony to me, but make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. Let me scroll up here. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. So there you go. What's going to happen in the last days? And just keep reading about all the things that's going to happen to Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. And that happened. Again, so the near fulfillment and a far fulfillment there. Speaking of the destruction of the second temple and then the return of Jesus. And you see those questions in that order asked. When will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place? So let's get into kind of the news of the day, the current events here. And of course, we know from the whole last 3 years since the pandemic about what was happening. This happened in Canada too, and it was common knowledge. At least to anybody paying attention, that indeed the government was practicing psychological operations on the citizens. They were tracking cell phones. They did this in the U.S., they did this in Canada, and they were monitoring what sort of language worked on the public in relation to the pandemic. So there was a psyop. Well, Twitter and all the big social media companies assisted, and in this case, assisted the Pentagon in psychological influence ops. So this is part of the Twitter files that are coming out. If you're following them, very interesting things coming out about them. It says, behind the scenes, Twitter gave approval and special protection to U.S. military's online psychological influence operations. So by the way, if you weren't duped by online media, by mass media, and big tech, then congratulations, because a lot of people were duped. A lot of people fell victim to the psychological operations presented by the U.S. military. And of course, all of us, if you're listening to me, you were probably one of those people who weren't quite believing what mainstream and what the government was telling you. And all the news coming out, you listen to Dr. John Campbell about the you-know-what in your arm. And there's a lot of news coming out, and we are being proven correct in the news that kind of the alternative media, if you will, was putting out and reporting on, although it was considered absolute 100% conspiracy theory. And most people, you look at people 60, 70, 80, they still think all this news about any sort of side effect of is conspiracy. My father included. He believes it's all conspiracy, and even though the news, the mainstream media, is reporting on all these bad things, he still believes it. So there you go. There will come a time in the last days where it won't matter what you say to people. God hardens the hearts of people. At some point, they just will not listen anymore. It doesn't matter how much truth, how much evidence you give them, they just will not listen to you. Their hearts are hardened towards whatever it is. And in case of the last days, their hearts are hardened towards receiving salvation through Jesus Christ. And that's part of God's complete overall plan, because they had the option to choose Christ, but they chose not to. And there's not going to be anybody left on the fence when the Lord returns. And so the pressure is ratcheted up every day, every week, every month, every year. And it will be escalating very, very quickly over the next couple of years, to the point where there'll be great pressure, and there will be no one sitting on the fence. If you don't accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior now, it's not likely to get easier. In fact, it will get a lot harder in the future. And so you need to decide now for Christ, because time is running out. So quickly through some of this news, and this is some of this news you may have heard, but this is AmericanMilitaryNews.com. Putin says Russia, Belarus drills to go on as ally, hints at new weapons. Now, the suggestion is that these new weapons are, in fact, the ability to fly sorties or deliver nuclear weapons. Putin said Russia will continue military drills with Belarus, as his Belarusian counterpart hinted at potential deployment of new weaponry in his country, probably air defense systems, the S-300, S-400, whatever they have there, and also be covered with the nuclear umbrella, and also the ability to strike from Belarus on Ukraine. And this, again, obviously opens up another front for Russia and really puts Ukraine at a disadvantage. They're fighting multiple fronts at this point as they go ahead with this. So 80% of Kiev is apparently without power. Russia has basically destroyed all the infrastructure for power. 80% of the main city there. Ukraine is bracing for yet more Russian attacks on its energy infrastructure. And of course, this is all leading to the U.S. putting Patriot missile systems in Ukraine. And Zelensky is in the U.S. right now, as I understand it, talking to Congress, looking for more money, looking for more weapons. And again, Biden has come out and said, you know what, you can have the Patriot missile system. So they're working out that deal, and that is a significant, severe escalation because Russia is going to be hand-tied. If Russia does not go nuclear, they're not going to be able to continue beating Ukraine, because one of the ways they're beating Ukraine right now is through air superiority. And in fact, Ukraine doesn't have anything in the air other than some drones. And so Russia is allowed to do what they want, all from a distance where the Ukrainian army can't really hit them. But the civilians, you got to feel for them because they're without power. And it says Moscow. So Ukraine accused Moscow of intentionally unleashing additional suffering on the population headed into Christmas. Remember, this Christmas time, December 25th, this is when they're going to have their bunkers completed in Moscow. Interesting, isn't it? Well, on the other side of things, in Russia, Russian city, and this is in Belgorod, suffers casualties, 14,000 without power there after Ukraine cross-border attack. So Ukraine is really hitting out over the border. They're getting a lot of assistance from U.S. to be able to do that, targeting information, intelligence, hardware, technology to do that sort of thing, to stretch out. All their infrastructure is destroyed in Ukraine, for all intents and purposes. And so now the fight is just trying to make life miserable enough for Russia inside Russia's borders that they then pull back. But that's not going to happen. So 14,000 residents in Belgorod Oblast without power. Russia is training a Belarusian combat pilots as Ukraine fears new assault. Again, this other theater of operation, this other front that they gotta now defend. It says Russia is training Belarusian pilots to fly combat jets with special warhead capabilities. And again, the suggestion is that that's nuclear weapons or the ability to carry nuclear weapons. And this will be bad. And of course, they've got their hypersonic missiles as well as a delivery system. So there's trouble brewing. Interesting date of December 25th for the completion of the nuclear bunkers in Moscow. And things are getting very, very bad. Now, in the U.S., this is zero hedge. CVS Walgreens limit sales of children's pain meds amid shortage. This is due to all the RSV that's going around, the flu, because we've been locked down for the last 3 years, and now everybody's getting sick all at once. This was expected, even foreseen. I would think the health leaders, the doctors who were in charge and in power, who implemented that lockdown, knew this was the inevitable outcome. Of course, they're not going to admit it, but they were doing it so that we would get past the worst, most pathological versions or variants of the you know what. And that may be their opinion, but it would be nice to hear them come out and say that here was our calculated plan. We knew this would flare up, but that there wouldn't be many deaths. And if they would share that honest information with the public, I think we could understand it a bit more. But given that they are not sharing it and everything's secret, and you know what, you're not allowed, you can't handle the truth from their position, then there's no credibility left for a government, unfortunately, when they're lying to you or withholding truth from you. So this is interesting. This has been happening in Canada. In fact, we had trouble too. Children's pain meds are now behind the counter, where they used to be off the shelf. They're behind the counter. You have to go talk to the, the staff there, the attendant, the pharmacist, I should say, to get this sort of medicine. Which, for this isn't that big a deal. But note that this only gets worse as supply chains get cut, price of everything goes up. We get closer and closer to, this nuclear apocalypse, or even the fear of it. Even the fear of it. People will start panic hoarding, and you'll see these shortages across all shelves. People will panic buy everything. So, by the way, what I sometimes say is panic before your neighbor panics. Panic before everybody else panics. And that is to say, be prepared well in advance of everybody else deciding that they need to get prepared. Just like in Europe with Survival Lily, their government is now coming out and saying, get prepared. Stock up food, stock up medical supplies, get prepared for energy outages, blackouts, and repercussions from the war in Ukraine and Russia. And that's well and good, and they should be doing that. The government should be doing that. But you and I should be seeing this stuff coming and be getting ready ourselves before the government. Because as soon as the government starts saying it, people will panic, and there will be significant shortages on the shelves. So now is the time to get ready for that. And I'm getting ready in many different ways, not only from a communications point of view, which I've spoken at on prior videos, but also, getting... boom boom sticks and these sorts of things, and getting licensed for that. You never know, because that sort of thing, I'm trying to watch my language here, but that sort of thing can be used for barter, for trade, should stuff go sideways. But also, help you protect your livestock and that sort of thing as well. So all these things, it's like going back to the Wild West. It's like going back to a time 100 years ago when you had to take responsibility for yourself. You had to have enough food and water and preparations to get through the winter, because there may not be anybody coming to your rescue. So these are just things that you need to pay attention to, be wise about, be like Joseph, who knew 7 good years were coming, and then after that 7 bad years, and stored up all that grain to feed his people during the 7 bad years. And you need to feed your family, and you need to feed potentially your neighbors who aren't paying attention. Just like Joseph in Egypt, no one paid attention to it. No one heeded the words uh, of that other than Joseph, and there was great famine in the land, and that same thing is happening, I think, here. So, folks, be prepared. Get ready. Stuff will get very much harder. I don't think it's all going to turn Mad Max. I think we will just be slowly ground down over days, weeks, months, even years, to the point where we're completely dependent on the government. And at that point, we won't have a choice but to accept the mark of the beast, but to accept the government, to be on the government dole and the government paycheck. We won't have a choice because we'll be desperate. So hopefully you won't be desperate. Hopefully you're planned ahead. You will have planned ahead enough so that you don't have to be in that situation. But we know as Christians, if you still don't follow the government, they will be putting some people in jail. So that is what's coming in the future, biblically speaking. I'll leave it there, folks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.